Hey everyone, this is Jennifer Beamer, owner-operator of ExpertlyDyed Art by Science, and this is the daily vlog, episode number 65, and we're finally going to be doing the blanket episode. Over the last couple of years, I have gone through a few things. So when I actually embarked on this blanket, it was the start of 2023. And if you're watching this now, in 2025, that's been a while. So it actually didn't take me too long to do the actual weaving of this. I was pretty dedicated to get it done. But to recap for those who might not have watched any of my content back then, or just need a refresher, what I wanted to do was finally make a blanket, because I felt like my weaving skills were sufficient at that point to do a larger project. And I bought myself the 32-inch Kromsky loom so that I could do larger panels. So when I did my review of Gulf Coast Native, which is this really nice kind of berry red in this blanket, I had sort of conceived of doing a blanket anyway, just to kind of see in a project how the Gulf Coast Native would hold up. And I had a bunch of random bits of yarn, stuff that was misdyed, so I couldn't quite sell it under the normal repeatable colorways for ExpertlyDyed. So I needed to find another way to incorporate it into something or sell it. But I wasn't really happy with selling it because some of the dye, it took too strongly in one place, and I thought, well, if all my other goods have been marketed under this, like all over modeling of color, then people would be unhappy with this, even though I might verbally tell them that it's not quite the same. So to use it in something that I didn't need the color to behave in a certain way, I thought, well, I'll just use it as part of this blanket project. And I was initially going for a kind of autumn theme, so we've got these lovely yellows and oranges and pinks and reds. So it's basically when leaves have really come into their autumn display, or fall in America. And I wanted to use up some other random bits, so I had also this one skein of Cormo, or maybe it was two, I think it was two small skeins of Cormo. And I had this hand-spun merino from, I think, back when I was learning how to use my Babe spinning wheel. So I think this came from 2011 or maybe 2012. And then I dyed it, but it lived in my stash for ages, so I was like, well, I'm going to use that. And then I had this hand spun that I used in one of my episodes before, I think it was one of the live streams, where I was basically trying to convey how to bring back a bat that you might have overblended, to kind of show that you don't really ruin wool. It's a creative medium, so you can just add, subtract, you know, ply it with something else. There's lots of things that you can do to reinvigorate a mistake so that it's still usable, so that you'll still be happy with it. So I didn't have full skeins of these, I just had, you know, like 50 grams of this or 100 grams of that. So I wanted to find a way to kind of creatively throw that in here and make it into this giant blanket. So it fits a UK size bed, full. So it's 200 by 200 centimeters. So the beds here are, is it 200 by 200? I think that's the size of the duvets. I'll have to double check on this. I think the duvet covers and the quilted blanket that I have is that size. But this is roughly 60 by 72. So when I hold it fully open, it's pretty much my full fingertip to fingertip wingspan, which you can't really see right now. So it's a 32-inch loom that I used, and this is roughly 30 inches per panel. So that was one panel, and this is the second panel. And it's about 72 inches long, so it's slightly longer than it is wide. And I wanted it to be large enough where two people could sit with the blanket. And if I needed an extra blanket on the bed, it would lay nicely over the whole top of my duvet. And I achieved that. But I ended up having a 5-yard warp, which I put onto my loom, and had to be really careful with how I did it because it was a little bit full, and the warp on the sides had a tendency to want to slip off. So I had to be really diligent about how I was wrapping it onto the back beam. But I think I did a pretty good job because the tension was pretty even throughout, and there isn't any warping of the weave, so it's very, you know, perpendicular. And then I didn't really want to have the panels line up perfectly, so you can see here. So you can see here where this red panel does not line up with anything, and then there's this slightly purple panel here, and that doesn't line up with anything. It didn't really have to line up. I just decided, well, I'm going to set up the warp in the exact same way, right? So it had some pattern, but the weft was sort of, I'm going to use more of the yarn that I have more of for a band. And then if I have less of a yarn, I was only going to do like maybe 4 or 6 picks of that color, just so that I could distribute it throughout the entire project and not just in 1 or 2 spots. So I'm not really good at doing random stuff when I make my various crafts. I talked about this ages ago. Back in 2013, I did a knitted shawl when I was traveling around Europe. It was my traveling project. And incorporating random stripes was still difficult for me when I did this, but it felt a little easier to just not be too precise or try to count and line things up. So I'm really glad that that turned out the way I wanted. And then I literally just had these 2 panels where I did a whip stitch to connect the 2 together. So I'll show you. Get it close up. So you can see I just grabbed the outer edge and did a whip stitch to hold it together. I didn't really anticipate it being a beautiful blanket. It was my very first one. I wanted it to just be functional. There isn't a lot of information that I could find on the internet about how to take 2 panels and put them together so that they look like one piece. That was also this large. Because like I said, this is a really big blanket, and I didn't want to do anything too fancy. in case I had to do it again and again to get it right. But because it's a heavy blanket, it sort of pulls there. And I didn't know basically what else to try. Now that I have had this blanket for a while and my cats have had an opportunity to lay on it, there are a couple of observations that I've made that I put into my next iteration of the big panel blanket. Namely, my cats have claws. And even though I'm really good about keeping Layla's claws trimmed, because she will use them against me, Vera, not so much, because she doesn't use her claws for anything. But she gets what I like to refer to as Velcro paws. So that's basically when her claws have grown so long and they're really sharp, like razor sharp, she just sticks to the carpet when she walks. And you can see in a couple of places here where the yellow yarn has been pulled out. So that's a bit that she's pulled out. And there's a few bigger spots that she's pulled out a bit more of the yarn. So you can see that bit there. It's a much bigger piece that she has pulled out. And so all of the yellow that I've used in this blanket is commercially spun. The pinks and reds that you see and this purple here, this is all hand spun. Now the reason why I want to draw attention to those distinctions is because I think had I made this blanket with just hand spun, I probably wouldn't have any issues where my cat has pulled out one of the plies of the yarn. I saw a big one earlier. Oh, yeah, there's this big one that she pulled out. So I think if I were to do this again, a big blanket project like this with cats, I would opt to do everything with just hand spun yarn. I finished this project in around early to mid-April of 2023. And so it's had close to 2 years of regular use. Even during the summertime, the cats will still opt to want to sit on this because it's soft and comfortable, and I think it gives them a lot of comfort just because of how it smells. And the bits that are hand spun, the only thing that I will see on the surface are the occasional little bits of pilling. Particularly with this larger gauge yarn here in the middle, where I've got a few of those little sweater balls that you'll get. So there's a little bit of pilling on the purple bit, but that was because it was a bulky 2-ply, and that was going to be inevitable. But the pinks, and so the Cormo is the pink bit, and the red is the Gulf Coast Native, has held up so well as a blanket yarn. So in part of my Fiber Talk series, one of the things I wanted to do is, especially for wools that I was less familiar with, I wanted to do the review, but then also put it into a project that I thought it might work well in, to sort of see, is it the case that it works well in this project? And I can confidently say that the Gulf Coast Native has held up the best, so there's almost no pilling whatsoever. And the Cormo, despite it being really, really soft, I think because I did a 3-ply, that has had very minimal pilling as well. So if you are looking for a quantity that you can buy, and especially because Gulf Coast Native is a conservation breed in America, you can probably get a couple of fleeces support the breed and make some really incredible blankets that will have heirloom potential. So I think I've probably washed this a few times. It's held up well to all of that, all of the wear and tear. It's just a couple of things I will implement in future blankets. I will opt more for using two things. I will opt more for using handspun over commercial yarns. And even in a combination of a slightly coarser wool with a slightly softer wool, I think because I used my good senses when it came to the spin, I did a very high twist for the Cormo. It held up as well as the Gulf Coast native, and I get that combination of different textures as well, so they will look visually different. So that's another way you can kind of play around with the visual aesthetic of your hand-finished items without having to spend too much time thinking about how you're going to do it, because sometimes you're busy and you just want something done. And the major hurdle from doing the project is literally just, how do I make it look kind of cool? That's me all the time. I just want to get something done because I have very limited time to just do something. So those are really the couple of things that I would take from this project going forward. Speaking of which, I decided to do another paneled blanket, and this time I used the blue textile that I reviewed in a previous Fiber Talk episode, which I think was about six months ago or thereabouts. And this is the result. And because I didn't have a lot of the wool, I opted to do sort of a lap blanket. So it's much longer than it is wide. You can kind of see it's not very wide. I think it was 17 inches across for each of the panels. So in total I think it was about 34 inches across. And then the length was, I think, 60 inches total. And then there's this really lovely fringe. And with this one I followed the same approach where I didn't necessarily want the panels to be perfectly lined up, so you can kind of see there's some stripes that don't, there's some stripes there that don't quite match. Sometimes I just want like an actual filming studio. I'm doing this in the workroom, so I don't have as much space as I want. But essentially, when I was weaving, I had one long warp. So I forget exactly what the warp was. I think it was somewhere around 4 yards for the warp. And I did all of the light, then all of the medium, then all of the dark. And I wove in random blocks of whichever color. And because I had roughly equal quantities, what I did was these thicker stripes, which you can see here. And I can tell that this is the end. And I'll tell you why. Because I started with dark, medium, light. So that was one of my repeats, is I was always gonna start with dark, medium, light as I progressed through the warp. And then I just stitched the two panels together in the same whip stitch that I did for the previous one. However, this one I think was a little bit better, mainly because it looks invisible. So you can see that it's here. There's a little bit that you can see down in this area. You can see there, that's where I stitched the two panels together. And I did, like I said, the basic whip stitch. And I think the reason why it worked better for this project, 2 reasons. It's a thicker yarn, and the way that this yarn feels. It's a very fluffy, disaggregated fleece, so it naturally wants to like puff up, and so it becomes pretty invisible when you do the whip stitch. So even though there's some pulling and there's obviously something that looks different than the plain weave that I've done for the panels, it kind of looks invisible because it's just melting into the fabric. So it would be interesting to see if I could make the yellow blanket with like as a project with the blue textile, to see how that whip stitch way to seam would turn out. That would be interesting, I think. So this project, I think I finished just before we moved to our new house, so that would have been June, thereabouts. So in the last 8 months, 9 months, this has been sitting on the bed to encourage one of our cats, Farah. She, for whatever reason, doesn't want to sleep in the bed with us, but she's also a heat-seeking missile, like our other one. So to kind of encourage her to join us on the bed, I put this like folded on there. So she lays on this, and it's fine if she puts this in her, well, either of our cats put this in their mouth, because it's not as precious to me as something that I've hand knitted, because this took a lot less time to work with, and I think it's also a lot more resilient because of the material that I used and the spinning that I did. So I would be less upset if she you know, ended up chewing a hole through this than one of my precious hand knits. But because she's got these little Velcro claws and she does lay on it, I thought there would be more visible results from her claws getting caught on it, but actually there's none. And so it's held up really well to both being used as a lap blanket, to being used like during the warmer parts of the year here, and a full comforter is just too much, but you want something on you. This works really well if you're just going to take a quick nap. Throw this on you. It keeps you warm. But yeah, there's absolutely no signs that the cat's claws have gotten caught, which I know they must have, because she's destroyed parts of my other blanket. And there's almost zero pilling whatsoever, which I'm really happy about, because pilling will make something look a bit more haggard and make it look a little older, look a little bit duller. But this looks exactly like it did when I first took it off the loom. So I've been really pleased with the blue textile as a woven blanket. So if I can get my hands on another couple, I'll probably have to get a couple of fleeces to have enough yardage to do one of the bigger paneled blankets. And I will also end up dyeing it. It would be kind of cool to see this dyed in lots of different shades and then spun together to kind of get what am I trying to say? It would be fun to see how it would look in a tweedy style, because it's not even the light bit here. It's not white. It's a very light gray. So that heathered look in the two different gradients, then dyed and then carded, will kind of give it some extra variation. Or I could even dye it after I've spun it. That would be really nice too. So yeah, I think my experience working with the washing, the spinning, and the weaving of blue textile has been really great, and I think my plan to put it into a blanket was one of the best decisions for it. It's not like the world's softest blanket, but it doesn't feel like it's coarse, so I don't have any wool sensitivities. I'm not allergic to a lanolin or whatever. So I think if you are someone who isn't bothered by how wool feels, I can lay on this. I can have it on me even with like a t-shirt and shorts. It doesn't feel scratchy. It feels soft. It feels warm. I don't feel like I'm itchy when I've been wearing it for a nap. Having it on me for a nap. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with this. I hope that in this review you kind of get a sense of like why I wanted to do these follow-up projects with my Fiber Talk episodes, because intuition is really good, but it's not always completely accurate. However, I do think we sometimes don't give ourselves enough credit to anticipate how things might be. So if you're more of a perfectionist, or if you're someone who might have a smaller budget and you hold on to your yarn and you think, but I only have this one opportunity to do something, I don't know how it's going to turn out. Sometimes it's worth just jumping and doing it, because this is the first time I worked with blue textile. It was the very first time I was going to do a project where I had zero awareness of how it was actually going to be in a project, period. And you know, sometimes taking that leap has a benefit to it. So I was really happy with how this turned out. Did not know it was going to, and I thought in the worst case scenario, my cats have some new blankets that they can do whatever they want to with. They want to, you know, suckle on it. If I needed it for transport, like in the cat carrier, or just for anything, then at least it would be used for something. But I'm really happy that I decided to do this project and not just let that wool sit in my inventory for years. I am not lazy. So that's it for this episode. I know that it's taken me a really long time to get this out to you. I initially wanted to do a tutorial video, which is why I did so much filming, why certain bits of this took so long to do, because I was anticipating filming a tutorial once it was all done. That didn't happen. I didn't feel like I was confident enough to actually do a tutorial, but now that I've done it a couple of times and I understand a little bit more about what you would need for a successful project, some of the things you might want to consider in terms of its use, or if you've got cats or other animals, how that might relate to the selection of yarns, and if you're doing hand spun, sort of thinking about the amount of twist that you're putting into it so that it's a bit sturdier. All of these considerations, which in hindsight makes a bit more sense, but sometimes I feel like it's better to have the footage in the off chance that actually this is really good to show, you know, this learning or that learning, but also to have just a variety of examples. So even if you've done something a few times, having an example with this and this and this is really useful to show to others so that they can get ideas, so they understand expectations when they're thinking about their projects. So I think probably going forward I will do this project again as an official tutorial, but that's part of the reason why it took forever. I've already mentioned this in my Wandering Threads podcast that I think I'm autistic and I'm signed up to be on the wait list for a diagnosis, And ever since that I started realizing these things about myself, what my boundaries actually need to be, I feel a lot better. But if you were wondering about this project, those are some of the reasons why. And I will be out with a couple of other episodes of Fiber Talks and Wandering Threads, and I do have another tutorial in the bag. It's just because of all the aforementioned things, it's taken me a while to get back to it, but I promise I will. I've kind of hinted it a little bit over the past year or so, but that will be coming soon. If you want to support me as a creator, you can just give me a thumbs up on this video and subscribe if you haven't already. You can leave some comments down below to tell the algorithm that this was a good video to watch. As well, you can go to my shop at ExpertlyDyed.com. You can follow me on Instagram so you can see what other things I'm going to be working on, even if I don't get around to it for a little while. At least you'll be in the know, and then I can also use that to prioritize my filming schedule. And last but not least, there's Patreon. So thank you so much to my patrons for supporting me each month. It means a lot to me. I do use the funds to support the show, so I've had to buy new equipment. So if you want to know more about that, feel free to head over to Patreon and take a look at that. But that's it for this video. I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!